former Secret Service agent, current private investigator, Art Wood. Hi, Art.
Hi, Dana.
Welcome
Thanks
back.
for having me on your show.
No problem. Welcome back to the program. This whole case has gone every which direction. It's gone around in circles and up and down and you name it. And now we have the confession, the videotape confession. And like you probably heard me say, I'm going to have Peter DeVries on a little bit later on.
Dana, I think that's wonderful that you're having Peter on. I have to congratulate him. I have always said, and you can back me up on
Yep.
this, every time I've been on your show, I've always said that this case can still be solved, that one of these kids would talk. I just never dreamed it would be Euron, and I'm so glad that Peter found a way to get him to talk.
Absolutely. He's a class act, and we'll hear from more from him later. But you, law enforcement, a long time, myself, our listeners are very educated when it comes to these sorts of things. And when you look at a confession just isn't a confession. A confession isn't like the old Hollywood days where you take the pen and the paper and you write out point form what you did. A confession is probably 75% of the truth, 25% BS and bragging, but it's also a huge evidentiary aid as far as clues go. There are a lot of clues, and I know you've taken a look at the transcript and looked at the video, and there's a lot of clues here, isn't there?
There are, Dana, and I'm so surprised that you mentioned that because I made a couple notes today, and one of the notes I made is the clues are here. And there's no reason, there's absolutely no reason now that the ARUBA authorities can't solve this case.
It's been handed to them on a silver platter, and
Has been.
To excuse the term, but it's right there. And why don't we get at it? Why don't we talk about some of these clues? And of course, we don't want to give anything away or do anything that may jeopardize the investigation. But then again, has there been an investigation? It took a crime reporter to solve this case, but let's hope that there's some jurisprudence here and this character finally does get taken before a judge.
Dana, listen, I saw Peter DeVries on a TV show last week, and he's got the right idea with this confession also. He thinks that Euron is telling the truth.
Yep.
Anybody, I don't know if all of your listeners have seen this confession. I don't know if they've seen these tapes, but it's pretty obvious to the average Joe watching this tape that this kid is telling the truth.
Yep.
His attorneys and his family are now saying that Euron was lying, that he did this to impress Patrick, and that he was under the influence of marijuana. Well, the truth is, it's pretty obvious that Euron smokes marijuana on a regular occasion, and that he, at no point was he stumbling for his words, or did it ever appear that he was lying? The only thing that I found in this whole confession where it appears that he's lying is that on one occasion he tells Patrick that I'll take that name to the grave with me.
Right.
And then the next day, Patrick is pushing him for a name, and he comes up with the name Dowry. I think he just threw that out there because he is going to take the name to the grave with him.
You know, evidence points towards several different things in this case, and speculation points several different ways in this case too. But there's a lot of things that are clear cut, and you make a good point. He's trying to use the defense of marijuana intoxication. However, his articulation is quite clear. He's almost to the point. In fact, I used it in an interview today that I'll play later. That he's bragging. He's very nonchalant. You can tell when someone's making up something. They stumble for their words, they grasp. You can catch them in contradictions, but this was very clear. He was telling the story about what he did.
You're absolutely right, and that's the impression that I got. At no point did I ever think he was lying, other than the fact that he made up a name for the friend. And I'm not sure there is a friend. We know that someone helped him get rid of this body. We know that someone came to his rescue. Whoever that is could be his friends, plural. It could have been his father. I do want to bring you to one section of that transcript of that confession. And I just want to read you this. It's one paragraph. I want your listeners to think about this. And here's what he said. He said, and he's talking about the person that came to his rescue. He says, he said, "No, this is not possible. you have to go home. I said, no, I can't ask you to take responsibility for this. He said, you're going home. I went home. That doesn't sound like an exchange between Euron and a friend.
No, and that sounds...
Sound like to you?
Well, that sounds a lot like an exchange to when I go out and I find my kid out after their curfew, and I say, no, you're going home.
Absolutely, Dana.
Yep.
It sounds like a father and son exchange, exactly, and that's something that I'm sure that Peter is looked at. I'm sure, I hope the Aruban authorities are looking at it. As I said on the last time I was on your show, there should be some people shaking in their boots in Aruba, and not just these kids.
Well, I believe that there are a lot of people shaking in their boots right now, and one thing that's got blown up, and I'm proud to say that I was part of that information being brought out, and now it's gone out to a national level on the Greta Van Susteren program, is my interview with Jug Twitty a while back and in December, and we were talking about the first 48 hours, and he was mentioning some of the crazy questions that Aruban law enforcement were asking him, and one of the questions, and Beth Holloway will confirm it a little bit later on tonight because she's part of the program, about Natalee and seizures. And then, lo and behold, we hear Mr. Vandersloot talking about seizures on this tape, and if that doesn't shoot up 1,000 red flags, I don't know what does.
Well, it sure does. And as a matter of fact, the person that asked that question of Beth Twitty, too, not just Jug,
right,
asked Beth, and it was Dennis Jacobs. He flat out asked her if Natalee had any kind of medical condition like epilepsy that would cause seizures. And another thing that I want to tell you about, on June the 1st, when Dave Holloway arrived on the island of Aruba, he found Dennis Jacobs at the Nord Police Department. And Dennis Jacobs told him, why would you think about organizing a search? Your daughter probably just ran off. Why don't you go down to Carlos and Charlie's and have a beer, and eventually she'll show up down there. He also told Dave Holloway that he had interviewed those boys and that they weren't suspects, they were witnesses. So, I think there's some people, we've talked about this. We know, how I feel about Dennis Jacobs,
yep,
and Jan van der Straten and some of the other Aruban police officers, and I have never bashed Aruban law enforcement. I've always stood up for them. I've always said that there are great police officers in Aruba just like there are any other country. The problem is they were never allowed to work on this case, and the people that controlled this case were helping a friend.
Well, we keep hearing about cooperation on the cable news shows, and when you look at it factually, any case, and I had a couple of DAs on the program last week, including a DA that tried to prosecute O.J., Chris Darden, and he and I were talking about last week where you have a case like this, where you have a confession, several confessions, you'd like to have a little something to go with it. And going back a couple of years now, Art, since I've had you on the program, there was physical evidence in this case, and you were part of it.
I brought it up that I had talked to a police officer that told me there was blood in that car, and that when it got to Holland, it turned out to be cleaning fluid. But he flat out told me straight up that there was blood in that car. And I found a belt out in the sand where another guy said that a body had been buried. So I'm just telling you, there was evidence. Things that aren't right there. We've known it for some time, and we've actually everything that you and I have talked about has been relayed to the new Aruban prosecutor. So, if people believe that the Aruban population suffered from a lack of tourism after Natalee went missing, they better watch out for what happens next if they don't solve this case.
It's huge, and the whole world is watching. And all you can say, you sit back and you and I can talk about it, and the listeners can talk about it, and some get angry and some get upset and whatever. But you have to wonder right from the get-go, why? Why did this go the way that it went? Incompetence, corruption, you name it. There are people that are being...
It went this way because the kid was a prince.
Yeah.
You know, his dad was a judge, and that's the way it went. And that's too bad. I saw on television where he's threatening that his family is worried that he's going to commit suicide.
Right.
Well, let me tell you what. It won't be because he's worried about Natalee Holloway. And that's